All right, so I'm David Estes. I'm the VP of Engineering at Morpheus. I'm also the co-founder, so I've been around since the beginning, very familiar with the product. I'm going to be doing a lot of demos for you guys today as we go through our different topics. I'm really excited to show you that. Feel free to ask questions as we go, and I'll happily answer those and navigate to those sections as needed. So first section we're going to talk about is provisioning and self-service automation. So we're going to kind of dive into just how Morpheus works from the start. We'll talk about how you can add cloud, some of its networking abstractions, containers, and clusters as well. There's a lot of cool stuff in here that is new that you did not see probably in Cloud Field Day 3. We've done a lot over the past year, especially with Kubernetes support, cluster management, things like that. So excited to show you that. So,
and in case you're disappointed, that was the end of the PowerPoint. This we show a lot better than we tell, and David can go into the product deep. So we're actually going to run live without a net. As long as the Wi-Fi holds out, we'll be good to go. So this is going to be a lot of clicking around and asking questions and having a good old time. So Feel free to take it away.
This is our dashboard. So when you first log into Morpheus, you get this nice dashboard. So just giving me a nice high-level things of what I can see. My instances, my favorites, some recent activity. We talked about that day 2. So it's got monitoring integrations, logging, and backups. So you're actually seeing that there's some open incidents on some instances I've deployed in the demo environment. We're going to skip that for now and go into provisioning and instances. So one of the cool things Morpheus does, it looks like it logged me out while Brad was talking for more than 15 minutes. One of the things that we like to talk about is when we developed Morpheus, we actually had a container-first strategy. So we actually released it to customers in preview with Docker support out of the box at the beginning because we knew that's the direction the market was headed. But we found that people weren't ready for that yet. So we went back and we added a bunch of expansions onto the VM orchestration layer as well as the bare metal orchestration layer. And you can see there's several instances here ranging in type. You can see I've got some database services, some web servers, some are stopped, some are started. And you can completely customize how these are started and stopped, and I'll kind of dig into that here. You can see I've got a Windows server that's running on VMware. And we collect a lot of information as well. So we've got the stats, so we can track the health of your VM, and this could be a container. When you actually represent them, this could be represented as a physical server, a VM, or a container, or a pod in Kubernetes, and we'll kind of talk into how the Kubernetes piece works too. There's some cool things in here though. I can see the network information, storage, nice little way from a self-service perspective to get access to this. We even aggregate the logs. In the case of Windows, we have the event viewer logs. Linux, we get the sys logs, things like that, and that is customizable. One cool thing I do like to show is we actually went really deep on this, and if the Wi-Fi behaves, which it looks like it did, we actually implemented hypervisor level console for almost every on-prem. So Zen Server, Nutanix, OpenStack, VMware all have hypervisor console support and KVM, which is really huge and it doesn't require any plugins and it's very secure. From a self-service perspective, that's huge. Our managed service providers also love that feature as well.
So you just use whatever the native platform provides, so Windows would be RDP, Linux would be SSH? That
would be guest OS level, and we also support that. So if you're on Amazon or public clouds, we detect that and automatically will attempt a guest OS connection over RDP or SSH. Mm-hmm. It's a multi-protocol supported console, and then we even have some proprietary code in there that actually translates. So you've got some things like Nutanix where they mask it, or VMware calls it, what do they call it? WebMKS or something like that, which is actually VNC just wrapped. So we actually have a translator that converts that to a standard protocol that the console can use.
And is the access for logs and stuff, is that agent-based, or are you pulling that from vCenter or whatever?
Since these are Windows logs, this is agent-based.
Okay.
So Morpheus is an agent-optional provisioner, meaning we don't require the agent to be pre-installed in any templates at all, or require you to use any specific set of templates. You can completely customize and use whatever template you want. We will install that agent optionally at first boot, and we can do that over Cloud Init, or we can do that over sysprep or guest customizations. You can optionally decide, hey, I don't want the agent. I want to just use Windows Remote Management and SSH, and we have graceful fallback to that mode as well. You do get some degraded capabilities, like your log aggregation turns off, because one of the benefits of that agent is it's able to compress those payloads and keep your bandwidth levels minimal. Whereas if you're polling for that, it's going to be very heavy on the network.
I don't want to derail you too much, but you did mention bare metal provisioning, which if you compare provisioning a virtual machine, provisioning a container, and provisioning something on bare metal is going to be the hardest of those. I don't know if that's going to be part of any of your demonstrations, but I'd love to hear how you're tackling challenges like dealing with the baseboard management controller, configuring RAID, doing firmware updates, controlling the BIOS. Like, there's a lot going on there.
There is. And there's some of that I can answer. I don't have it demoable in this environment to show you, but for example, a lot of it we can leverage like some of the abstractions in HPE's OneView with Synergy that can leverage server profiles, and we can deploy the server profiles with Image Streamer and things like that. We can also map them with ILO and do Pixie boot services as well. We also can do the same thing with UCS Manager. And then finally, we do have a new feature that is coming out. We already had Pixie boot, but we're adding native IPMI where we actually talk directly to any gear via the IPMI protocol. So that's something on the roadmap actively right now.
So you guys do a lot. How big is the footprint of the
Product itself.
itself?
So Morpheus, deploying Morpheus is actually a 15-minute project. You can basically deploy any VM that's Red Hat-based or Ubuntu-based or CentOS-based. I'm excluding Red Hat 8 because it's too new. But you just deploy Morpheus on there. We distribute it as a Yum or Debian package. And it can run as an all-in-one with about 8 to 12 gigs of RAM. We recommend at least 12. You can run it as low as 8, but we recommend 12 minimum. And it will start up all the services on one box. And then you have the other option later on after a POC, you can split that into a 3-node or a 5-node where all the services are clustered across 3 or 5 nodes replicated. Or you can split the individual services and do multi-region redundancy, things like that. And I think that's about 7 VMs per region if you do it that way.
So from a scale perspective, some of those larger customers, how big of a overhead is the entire memory disk and CPU?
Sure. I will say that I have had one customer that ran for 3 years with over 10,000 VMs managed by one Morpheus appliance with 16 gigs of RAM. So it actually scales and optimizes very well. And part of that is how we leverage the agent. Being able to distribute that. We use our backend data structure. We use SQL-based or MySQL-based for the persistent storage. Basically anything that's you need to maintain that active state or transactional state on. And then we actually use Elasticsearch for temporal data, your stats, your metrics, your analytics, so that we can optimize that side of the house differently. Log aggregation also goes there. This provides a much more efficient way of managing things. You minimize the overhead on your writes and your transactions to a SQL-based or relational database while still having that for maintaining some of the more critical items.
As someone coming from project management background, I wonder how you do your product integration testing. It sounds like you have so many integrations.
Yes, so we have 85 integrations, and there's a couple ways we do that. We actually have full automation testing that runs before every release. It takes 28 hours to run, but we actually shrink that down to about 6 to 8 because we parallel run that. And that means we have a lab where we keep a lot of these integrations up and running, and we do that a lot through our partnerships with these customers. They'll give us an NFR or something like that, or we'll work with some of our partners who will actually give us access to certain things that we need to run those tests, or they'll run those for us.
I've got 1 to 3 questions. Can you click on the history tab?
What?
Can you click on the history tab?
Sure.
All right, and what kind of, one of the questions is there an audit tab where that's showing history? So when people are going and clicking on the console, I have an audit history of those people going in and actually performing activities.
Yes, there is. So there's 2 ways we do that. One, we actually, this is a history tab of just operational tasks, the high-level stuff, what's happening, what workflows or day 2 operations have been performed on this. You can also see the provisioning history and get task output. We also have recent activity, and that's actually done from the operations side. So you can see the activity of things that are being done. And then there's more granular full audit log stuff that you typically need for compliance or a SIEM logging tool, right? So there's 2 ways we do that. We actually keep an audit log table separately on the back end that I don't expose, and that's just for security, so we have access to it at all times. We also have a way for you to export we call it common event format logs. So we actually have CEF logs for all the audit trail information. Any operation performed by what user, IP address, console access is also done. And that can be offloaded to an external SIEM logging tool, as well as it's available technically. If I go to Operation Health logs, so the logs of the appliance itself also get sent to its own log aggregator. So I can actually drill in here and see some of the stuff in here. So if I look, I should be able to actually pull up a CEF log. You can kind of see what those look like. So there's actually a console access record right there. I don't know if you can see that, but it actually shows console access, and this is standard format that most SIEM logging tools can parse. Source IP address, my username, terminal, and it actually tells me the object was an instance of ID 6975. And I can even see the object name, so JW Windows Demo 1014.
And then the other question that was similar almost in breadth is MFA, 2FA support.
Yes, so typically we leverage that through SAML. So if you've got a SAML integration or as a matter of fact, Azure's Microsoft AD, things like that, that all ties into SAML and works perfectly. This one's actually integrated with it, but I forgot my password to use that. So this is the ADFS right here. I should be able to log in. Oh, I guess, see, there it is. So that's single sign-on, but it would also leverage MFA if I had that turned on in the environment.
So I see there's a budget, so there's obviously an accountancy piece of this.
Yes.
Where does the user go in here to actually provision? And I assume there's role-based access built in.
Yes.
So where does the user go to provision is one question. I have a second question as well.
Provisioning, so we are on provisioning instances. I was just getting into like how we represent an object, but if you see this add button over here on the instances page and say, hey, I want to provision something, this exposes your service catalog. What can I provision? Okay. And this can be completely customized. We provide 50 out of the box, common, like there's a Mongo sharded cluster in here with 7 VMs, all pre-configured for you in Docker on every single cloud technology we support. Or you can completely put your own in, and we have instructions and guides on how to do that. And that can be orchestrated many ways, and we'll talk about that when we get into the next section, what other ways you can do it, for example, tying into configuration management, things like that. You can also do multi-tiered applications, and I'll also dig into that here a little later. Say I wanted to deploy something. Say I want to deploy an Apache web server. I could pick Apache. You'll notice these 3 icons over here. That's telling you that there's actually available layouts for this option for both container technology, VM technology, as well as bare metal technology. So I can click Apache. And next, I can pick a group and cloud. We use groups to organize our instances. It's a real nice way to do it. We also can tie role-based access control to control as access to which groups. You can actually also apply policies towards groups, and we'll get into that on the governance side as well. And then you can share out what clouds are available to each group. And there's another model even higher than that for MSPs where you can actually have own tenants where they have their own users, their own roles, their own groups, even their own clouds. But the master tenant can also share cloud resources to a subtenant as well. So there's different layers to this model, depending if you're just a smaller company to treating big enterprise, treating yourself like an MSP.
Yeah, I'd say MSPs are probably about 30-40% of our customer base. We've got some pretty good sized ones who are maybe hosting a version of Morpheus up in a public cloud, or they're wanting to expose their own hosted private cloud, but also broker on-prem and public cloud and be the intermediary. So
yeah. This is the demo environment. If this was stood up from brand new, from scratch, do you get this extensive service catalog, or is there where you can opt into? Someone already did the work, so we can leverage that, and I just need the ISO or whatever it is.
Right. So in this case, the 50 out of the box, you get full access to. We actually provide and expose those images via CloudFront. So you can actually pull those. Those are actually on CloudFront. So no matter where you are in the world, you can pull those in an optimal way and use them. We have some MSPs that do that. And when we get into roadmap, we have a new feature with basically, I'll talk about it later, but it's called the marketplace. We're going to allow people to expose their own catalog items, similar to like a Docker Hub kind of situation.
So if you wanted to stand up, say, a test lab, you could use this, and out the box, you could start dividing up infrastructure, or I guess capacity, in AWS or Azure or wherever.
Exactly, and you can set quotas and limits and assign those to different teams.
And do you have professional services for anyone who wanted to extend this?
Yes.
Yeah, so we've been building out our PS team over the last year or so. We're not trying to compete with our partners. We're actually partner first. We work with a lot of the partners that are in this room. Our goal, though, is to make customers operationally proficient, because this category of product tends to become shelfware. Oftentimes, and I'm not saying Morpheus in general, but a lot of companies will buy automation as part of large data center refreshes and never get it deployed. So our PS is really designed to help people get using the platform in the first 90 days. We rely on our channel partners, systems integrators, if they want to extend the platform, do a bunch of Ansible playbooks, or do other pieces. I think one of the reasons we're finding a lot of traction with the SIs is we're at the center of the control plane in a lot of ways, and so we kick up a lot of rocks on problems that are in customers' environments, and it's an opportunity for a lot of partners to come in and do a significant amount of PS. So we do just enough, I'd say, to get people functional and using the platform, and then really rely on our partner ecosystem to kind of double click in to the rest of the concentric circles of challenges that we see.
Right, I just want to add to that is one of the unique things about our product too is we aren't a product where you need professional services to have an ROI. It's very easy to get up and running, a lot of things you can do on your own. So it is typically an immediate ROI with a lot of our customer base with that option to extend it into that professional services side.
So a lot of IT shops are siloed, which typically, something I've heard. So which group usually reaches out to you and say, hey, can you come in and I want to see your product?
I like to say that we play organizational psychologist as part of our sales cycle. We find out who doesn't like who, and some of our features are because the ops guy hates the network guy. Can you make it so I never have to talk to the F5 administrator again? Sure, we can do that. So I'd say typically we sell to and talk to senior leaders in I&O. This is not a single work group or a VM admin who just wants to do a little project. Really, because of the breadth of what we orchestrate, it's VPs of I&O who realize they have 5 different teams, each doing their own thing, and it's untenable, and we help again, kind of bring some sanity to that process. So I&O is usually who we're working with, but app dev is a key constituency, and one of the things David's going to go into in a follow-on section is how we appeal to that persona, because oftentimes, we'll start talking with an I&O team, and they'll say, but we're going to go out and talk to the DevOps group. And I say, first, if you're ops and you're calling them DevOps, you've missed something along the way, because that's not really the point.
I've had that customer.
Yeah, but we can, when we go and talk to them, we open up the CLI and talk about infrastructure as code and how they'll never have to talk to IT again, and they like it. But it's fun, as you guys a lot of you know, because you're selling into the same space.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So moving forward a little bit, I'm going to actually pick an AWS cloud in this example just for brevity of time. But you can actually see another thing we do is we have policy engine. So this actually has a naming policy in place. It's loosely formed. In this case, you can make it strict and override it. I'm just going to use it for now. I'm going to hit next. One of the things we did, we talked about Apache. So it's detected that I actually have a Kubernetes cluster running inside my AWS cloud, as well as a Docker host. So I could run it in multiple ways. And I can run that as a container and say, you know what, let's actually just run that on Ubuntu 14 or CentOS or whatever it is. And I can say, okay, let's pick a plan. Oops. So I can pick, a T2 micro, T2 small. And there's a whole costing thing on this, and we'll get in that later in the session, but you can actually see it's actually estimating your cost per month. It syncs that data down nightly. It can even actually give you cloud price comparison from the other clouds you have integrated in the system. So if at provision time you'll see, hey, is there a cheaper option? My available cloud, you can do that.
What's the scope of that policy engine? What can you include in policy there?
Okay, so you can do things, well, there's 2 parts, right? There's role-based access control.
Okay.
And then we treat that different. That restricts what access level you have to different resources. Mm-hmm. And then we have a policy/governance engine, which controls quotas, workflow approvals, tying into talking to ServiceNow and asking for a workflow to be kicked off, waiting for approvals, storage quotas, naming policies, tons of other things, expiration policies as well.
Can you tie that into limiting types of resources deployed?
Yes.
Okay.
That's typically, there's 2 ways to do that. Some of that is actually done with the RBAC piece, okay. and I'll kind of go into that. Because, for example, maybe you don't want this user to have access to this resource pool. Mm-hmm. In this case, in AWS, a resource pool is a VPC. Mm-hmm. It could be an OpenStack project, an Azure resource group, or it would be a cluster/resource pool in vCenter. In the case of Kubernetes, the resource pool is the namespaces. Mm-hmm. And you can control very granular permissions to what group. You can control group level access to those, as well as tenant level.
Awesome.
Another cool thing I do like to show really quick is you can see here I've got root storage. We actually go really deep on these integrations. So I can even do provisioned IOPS. I'm not just giving you, least common denominator across all these clouds. I'm giving you pretty detailed capability coverage across each cloud integration. I can pick all those security groups. We do have native security group management, security group permissions as well. So you can actually create security groups directly in Morpheus and rules and sync those. And you can actually control who has access to consume those security groups or assign those to their instances. And that also works with ACI, with application-centric mode. It works with NSX. It works with OpenStack, several of the on-prems, as well as the public clouds. for brevity, I'm going to hit next here. There's a lot more we'll get into in the next session talking about automation, so I'm going to skip this for now. But one of the things I do like to mention is we support code deployment. We talked about that load balancer capability where I can say, hey, this is an AWS, I could create an ELB, or I could create a VIP and an F5, a NetScaler, an A10, AVI, or HA proxy. So lots of different cool options there. We also support scale groups, the Azure scale sets, AWS scale groups. Morpheus actually has a horizontal scaling system with monitoring and threshold scaling as well. Which is cool about that one is you can do cross availability zone or cross cloud with that, depending on your technology you're using. We tie into backups as well. We can do Amazon VM snapshots. We tie into Veeam, Avamar, Commvault, Rubrik, Zerto. Thank you. There's a large list, so I'm starting to forget the order, but there's a lot in there, and we have native too. So Brad talked about how we brought our own stuff into the product first, and that's because sometimes you go into customer site and they say, I don't have IP address management, I use an Excel spreadsheet, which happens a lot more often than you would think it would happen, but it happens a lot at very big companies. So we provide a solution.
IP address management, isn't that spreadsheets? That's what Excel was.
We offered to do an Excel integration for their IPAM.
We joked about doing an Excel integration, yes. But we've actually got a lot of integrations with that. We've got InfoBlocks, BlueCat, SolarWinds, PHP IPAM, as well as our native built into the product.
Nice.
Which covers pretty much the majority of what most people are using, except Excel. And we do power schedules. So maybe you have a workload that you don't want to run off business hours and save money in the cloud. You can actually apply power schedule. And you can do that via policy as well. So there's different ways to scope those policies. This one does have a shutdown and expiration policy in place for demo. So after 24 hours, it's going to shut it down. After 48, it's going to delete it unless I extend it. And this is just to keep our sales engineers from running away with our resources, which happens. So that's actually going to deploy, and showing just a little bit real quick what that looks like. It's going to show you an estimated time to completion. And it learns that, so it adapts. I like to joke it's a Microsoft accurate level progress bar. So,
that last 10% will get you.
But it does learn your environment. And I know one thing I really want to show, just the big changes in 4.0 is Kubernetes. We really refactored. We were Docker native first, and we actually self-service provision Docker hosts. We've completely revamped that in 4.0. For example, you can add our Docker orchestrator still, which we've had in place since the beginning. And we have a couple of customers that use that. You can add Amazon EKS. We will shortly be adding AKS and GKE as well. This is actually just because you're on our 4.0 beta that is getting ready to actually have a non-beta release here in the next week.
PKS too? PKS?
PKS as well is on the list, yes.
And talking about the automation, are you using the integrated pre-existent automation system the cloud provider is offering? I mean, if you, I noticed that you instance AC2 in AWS, and after the process, are you using the APIs, or are you simply creating a CloudFormation file that is delivering?
It's a combination. So in some cases, we're calling EC2 APIs directly. In some cases, we're leveraging CloudFormation.
Okay.
And that actually gets into a question that was asked earlier about how we keep up with various past services that are exposed.
Yeah.
And this is something that has actually been added very recently, is we've already had CloudFormation support, ARM template, Terraform for a long time, over a year. We're adding the ability to expose mini CloudFormation templates and ARM templates as service catalog items directly rather than as blueprints, so that we can allow you to very easily extend various past services that maybe Morpheus is not yet aware of by creating a small CloudFormation template.
Yeah.
And building form, you can actually build form inputs for your wizard to actually push into those templates as well, so variables, things like that. So,
I think one of the challenges with CloudFormation templates is sometimes AWS gets ahead of what is even available.
Yeah.
The CloudFormation template, and you have to use a custom resource. So if you can wire that up in some way that it will take that service, create the custom resource in CloudFormation template, and make it deployable, I think you'd have the eternal gratitude of many people.
Yes, I have learned recently that CloudFormation often does get behind, but also there are other platforms as well. We talk not just CloudFormation, but ARM, but also if you want to leverage Terraform to do it as well, you can do that as well. So, or even Ansible. So there's a lot of cool ways to do that, and we are expanding our coverage on those. That's kind of a big focus we've started towards the end of this year, is on the PaaS platform side.
Yeah, I think in our next section, we're going to go a little deeper on the whole infrastructure as code construct. The CNCF stuff we did with v4.0 is pretty cool, so wanted to make sure we touch that.
Probably at the end of the day, 5 years from now, they're all going to be Kubernetes specs anyway, right? So just
Now,
deploy a
this may
service.
5 years, 5 weeks, whatever.
So maybe a question you see a lot since you do tout your ServiceNow integration, but since ServiceNow also has some automation features, why should someone choose you over just using what's there in ServiceNow?
ServiceNow has a very basic capabilities, a subset of features that it can do for this type of automation orchestration on the compute side especially. They do have their own CNP product.
Yeah, they bought a little company called IT App a few years ago.
Yeah.
We have integration of ServiceNow from a service catalog perspective, incident management, alerting, populate the CMDB, approval workflows. We have pretty deep ServiceNow hooks. It's showing up in most of our big enterprise accounts. So I would argue our ServiceNow integration is better than what comes out of the ITOM portfolio.
Okay. Yep. It even has the ability to, those catalog items you saw in Morpheus, once you add a ServiceNow integration, you can selectively push those as service catalog items directly into ServiceNow via our ServiceNow plugin.
Because we know IT is sometimes siloed. The ops team doesn't always get the love from the ServiceNow team. They actually appreciate that plugin because they make a change to our service catalog and it populates as a front-end catalog item in ServiceNow without ever having to ask your SI or your ServiceNow admin to go create you some front-end workflow. It just is because the plugin manifests inside ServiceNow. So things like that are a little bit different for us.
So you mentioned earlier a company being completely unaware of how many VMs they have, and I would say every single company in the world has that exact problem. So can you set policy and is there a way to have elasticity and find those VMs that haven't been used in ages? And actually,
one of the sections we're going to get into is around cost optimization and right sizing. So definitely we'll hit that.
Yep. I think actually I'm supposed to cover in this session a little bit of the brownfield side as well. So I'm running a little long. So one of the things, let me dive back into this, and then I'll show you something I think that'll answer that question very well.
Thank you.
So on the Kubernetes side, we did a lot. You can deploy Kubernetes clusters very easily. One of the cool things I really like to show with this is we actually have a CNCF certified version of Kubernetes. We call it MKS, Morpheus Kubernetes Services. It is deployable on every single cloud we support. Not only that, it is adaptable. So if you want to actually adjust how we deploy Kubernetes via kubeadm to contain your own sidecars, maybe your own persistent volume plugins, like maybe NetApp's new one is a Triad or something like that, it's very easy to do. So you're not restricted to a small subset of just what we support. You can completely adjust how your Kubernetes is deployed and scale it out directly from Morpheus and upgrade it. So say I wanted to deploy Kubernetes, I could actually say, hey, let's deploy that on VMware. This takes a little time, so I probably won't show it given my time constraint, but I can give it a cluster name, resource name. I can pick a layout, so I can do an HA cluster or a standard, an HA being 3 masters, 3 workers, with the option to extend the worker count. Regular cluster is a single master, 3 workers. I can pick a plan and a worker plan size. I can pick the network this exists on. I can pick, what data store it's going to use, things like that on the vCenter side. This adapts, just like you saw that add instance wizard, for the relevant provision type. So it could be bare metal, it could be VMs technology as well. Once that's deployed, it will create this. And what's really cool is it's not just greenfield. So it's actually tracking, and it syncs every 5 minutes state from the Kubernetes side. So it's checking, hey, here's my namespaces. I can create new namespaces and delete them. Here's my masters and workers, and I can actually dig into these workers and see what's going on as far as health and stuff like that, so I get all the stats on them. We actually can see all the services that are registered, all the containers, not just application containers, but maybe I want to see system storage, all those types of containers or sidecars you've got running. What's cool about this is I can even hit the info on these and see the spec. So this one's FluentBit, which is doing the logging, and status. So it's really handy for just getting that data from a management perspective on the Kubernetes side. There's also some actions you can perform on these. For example, I can actually delete that pod or service directly. I can do the same with jobs. persistent volume claims, which don't have any in this environment, and we also track the logs coming from that cluster. So if you've got issues or you've got something stuck and pending, like a persistent volume claim, you can very easily kind of diagnose what's going on directly from this UI.
What's your cost show as 0 for that, just out of curiosity?
What's up?
The cost on that screen before showed as 0, and it looked like it was the running cluster.
Cost?
Yeah, right above you. USD 0 cost this month.
Oh, that's checking. You can actually apply cost to your pods. So like if you want to do chargeback, showback, you can actually, and it'll say, hey, this is costing you this. There's pods running on this that are costing you this much a month. Things like that.
Yeah, I think why this overall, this cluster piece and Kubernetes piece was pretty big for us. Like David said, we've long been able to deploy to Kubernetes. We've had Docker in from the get-go, but because we're dealing with a lot of large traditional operations teams, many of them said, hey, that's great, but actually standing up in the care and feeding of the underlying Kubernetes cluster is one of the challenges I'm having. We don't want a wholly separate greenfield environment that just does Kubernetes, because we're on this path to transition. Bringing that into the fold was fairly important, and we've got a lot of good traction just over the last couple of months since we brought it out.
So I've asked this question a lot whenever someone enters this space. Why build it? I mean, there's, a half a dozen enterprise class Kubernetes maintainers who will manage this service for me. Why not push back on your customers and say, you know what, that's, because it expands the surface of the offering and support costs, complexity, etc. You guys already have 85 integrations. If I'm a executive looking at this solution, I'm thinking, man, you guys are biting off an awful lot.
Well, there's a couple answers to that. One, we use KubeADM to do this. So, I mean, we've leveraged a lot of existing technology that's been out there. Two is a lot of these enterprise groups that are creating things to deploy Kubernetes are not consistent across various cloud platforms. And we talk about how we are agnostic to various cloud platforms and different enterprises. So we needed to build a tool that would fit that gamut. So that is really one of the big reasons we did it. We also already had container orchestration in the product, and we realized, hey, we've got our own orchestrator. It's actually similar to Kubernetes in what it exposes, but Kubernetes is winning out. We need to natively support Kubernetes. It also digs a step further because as you start talking about what's going on with VMware and their announcements a couple weeks ago, is Kubernetes is going to start orchestrating a lot more than just containers, VMs, things like that, services. We needed a way to natively talk to Kubernetes to really expose those service catalog items. So in order to do that, you really had to go through a holistic solution for Kubernetes and not just a partial piecemeal solution.
But I think what we're doing that's not kind of myopic to just doing it our way is, hey, use ours if you want. If you want to use EKS, PKS, like great, let's at least put it under a common RBAC model and give you access to the other operational capabilities of Morpheus as an overlay. But if you haven't yet chosen a path, we're going to build it into the product. And that's
right.
Philosophically, our goal in general, right, is if you've already made a tool choice, but you need it to talk to the rest of your environment, we want to bring it into the fold. If not, we want to provide a native capability for you. So that, whether that's IPAM, DNS, Service Mesh, Kubernetes, we're gonna give you something viable until you tell us you have some other tool that you want to use.
Right, and I should mention, installing Kubernetes itself is not as big of a breadth of thing as you think it is. We already have an orchestrator that automates all these workloads we deploy. As a matter of fact, our Kubernetes deployment code is leveraging all the same stuff your self-service portal is leveraging. So from a maintenance perspective, it's very minimal. That's why actually when we built the Kubernetes scripts that we deploy on, as a matter of fact, we did it just for one cloud to start. We did VMware, and within a week we had all our clouds supported because it was literally just okay, now we've got these scripts, let's just seed in the initial catalog offerings, and that was it, and they work. So from a management or maintainability perspective, it's very easy for us to keep that up to date. And we even enabled it so a customer can modify it and change it to if they wanted to use a different distribution, they could.
Quick question about that, going back to the chargeback, showback.
Shameback.
Yeah. Can you tap into whichever public cloud vendor and actually show the cost from that region and make it accurate?
Yeah, again, we've got a whole little section. We're going to dive deep into costing and analytics just to help break it up. I don't know if we're
get that updated.
What's
that? How frequently can you get that updated? Because if you're like doing a spot instances, and hey, today at 2 p.m. is a really good price, but today at 3 p.m. not so good price.
Well, they actually changed the pricing for spot instances. It no longer fluctuates on the market anymore. It's now a flat price.
You stay over there.
So
that's good.
I don't know if we'll have time to get to it. I'm watching time, but basically there's two parts to costs on the public cloud side. First, we sync down the estimated costs. So like you pick a T2 Nano or something like that, what's its estimated monthly or hourly cost? We sync that down nightly. And then what we do is we also can turn on Cost Explorer on the various public clouds and give you actual real-time costs of the actual deployments. That's what this is showing here on the Cloud Summary tab. So there's two levels, right? There's the estimated when you're provisioning, and also this is the real-time cost. So we expose both of those to you.
Really?
Complete with currency conversion as well. So if you have custom currencies you want to expose it to for multiple departments in your enterprise, you can also tie into currency conversion services and get real-time currency rates as well.
Yeah. So if I've heard all of the different feature sets correctly, you are directly competing against VRA, VROPS, and Cloud Checker?
less VROPS. I would say if Turbonomic, VRA, OpenShift, and Rundeck had a baby, it would be us.
Well,
Aren't you the daddy?
Okay.
And Cloud Stuff. And Cisco Cloud.
Sassy, Chris.
Yes.
I like it.
Okay.
But yes.
But other than that, yes.
Yes.
But maybe not so much OpenShift. I mean, OpenShift does a whole lot of other stuff, right?
It pretty much manages Kubernetes and does analytics on top of Kubernetes, and it's what we do.
Yeah. I mean,
I've got in my notes multi-region billing and chargeback. So that's, because each of the billing and chargeback parts are nice, or shameback, as you're saying, right? But the multi-region part of it, when you're dealing with different countries, geographies, so on and so forth. Right?
A large of that comes from our MSP market, where we have MSP customers who are exposing those to multiple countries, and you can actually set currency level by tenant as well. So that allows them to do that.
This is the first time that your technology is actually a service to your internal customers, because you can say, like, the operations department used this percentage of the data center or this percentage of the cloud resources.
Nice. Well, that's why we say shameback, because chargeback people aren't doing as much, but at least being able to show
on the
data.
Chargeback side, and especially for the MSPs and MSPs, MSSPs, all those approaches, do you have it where you'll tie directly into Tech Data, Arrow, Avnet, stuff like that, because they have a different pricing model than you would see from the traditional carriers?
So you're able to actually use our API to override prices as well.
Okay, cool.
So you can override, do markup, percent markup.
Can you then issue POs and just have it, integrate out with like ConnectWise or something like that?
We get asked that a lot. We stop at generating an invoice. We will give you a billing API with a lot of data and knock yourself out. But yeah, we haven't. Haven't gone
that's
down
just one more checkbox.
One more. We should do that. But
I see this as like a use case which is implemented by many organizations where they aim to get the cost, IT cost from different units.
Right.
So this is like a real step forward for many organizations.
Right, exactly. And it also gives you, like we said, an immediate ROI, because once you plug in that cloud, you get immediate visibility into those costs. Not only are we talking about greenfield and self-service and reducing or maintaining, basically keeping that from happening, but also, or eliminating that shadow IT, we're also giving you the ability to get visibility to existing shadow IT and fixing that problem.
So we've kind of hit session 2 and 4 in combination. I saw you running that on the fly. We probably want to nip this soon and officially transition to another section so that we can not have a 90-minute streaming video, although it would be fine if people would stay and watch that long.
On this session, one last thing really quick. We did talk about that discovery piece. We are also discovering your existing VMs. For example, you can see these are flagged as managed in this cloud. You'll see some marked as discovered. And we do this with all our clouds. We can actually ingest all that brownfield. And I just wanted to show that. That was we kind of got branched off there, but if you go into VMware, you can see your hypervisors, the status of your hypervisors, if they're overwhelmed or not. You can see hypervisor level stats for things where the agent's not installed. And there's actually guidance on that, which we'll talk about in a later session.
And you're doing that discovery by logging into vCenter and then pulling?
Yeah, so we're pulling those APIs. We do that sync every 5 minutes.
Actually, given how much we've already hit on cost, if you wanted to do a quick flyby of guidance, we might just tie a knot in it.
Okay. So one of the things is because we have all this data, we can actually turn on guidance and actually give you recommendations. So we can say, hey, this Puppet Master is barely being used. You might want to right size it, right? This is a VM. It says, hey, you're using about 300 megs of 4 gigs. You probably go to a 2 gig of RAM server. And then you can act on that. And that exists for every cloud we have. We can do that with the agent, which gives you more accurate data, or we can do it without the agent in some cloud types where the hypervisor has enough data to do it. We also can ask the clouds. In this example, there's reservation recommendations that are actually sent out to us. So if there's a reserved instance recommendation coming from AWS or Azure, we can expose that as a guidance recommendation as well. The other one is turning things off. Things that are completely unused will also represent those, as well as a discovery type in the guidance engine.
Yeah, if the recommendation is to, I don't know, manipulate a resource that isn't hot addable, do you then manage the reboot time for that too?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So Chris mentioned, hey, you sound a lot like, Ergonomics or Cloud Health. What I'd say, going back to that construct I talked about earlier, if a customer really is only wanting to go deep and nerd out on cost, right? Tell our partners, tell our field, hey, there are tools that have spent millions of VC dollars building out, very deep tools in that area. But I think one of the reasons, VMware bought Cloud Health, one of the reasons we added this capability to the product, that's a symptom of a bigger problem. So our intent is to help you get your house in order and then apply policies to clouds, role-based access, and all the goodness to keep it from becoming a problem again.
Right.
And you've got NFR copies for all of us in the room?
You get an NFR, and I get to steal my joke, because Stephen stole it earlier. But actually, yes, in all honesty, I would like to get you guys set up in the lab. It's something I would love to get you guys some hands-on experience on. So after the fact, hit me up, and we will do that.
Cool.
All right.
Good.